And welcome again. Welcome back to Not Another Podcast 2.0. I am your host, Ricky, and welcome to episode 2, part 2 of our 90s Radio Wars Shot Jock saga. So hopefully be able to wrap all this up on this episode. But I want to start off first by thanking everybody for the support from episode number 1. It definitely was more than I ever thought I would ever get. And again, I'm not trying to gain anything from this. It's just fun for me. I have a full-time job that I do, but as I did the first one and posted it and tagged some of the people that I listen to and some of the shows that I listen to get the comments and the DMs and the messages that I had got from everybody was fucking amazing. Really. So it has, the last couple of days have been just fucking awesome for me. So thank you to everybody, and thank you to everybody that just listened to it and watched it and downloaded it. I really do appreciate it. And then to start the day off today, this morning, Wednesday morning. I'm not sure when I'll have this up. I'm hoping to have it up tonight. But yeah, to get a message from Russ Rollins for me to call into the show. So to have him sort of to know that he watched it, number one, but then for him to give his his outtake on what he thought of it, and then to have me call in, that in itself was fucking awesome. Now, of course, I was nervous. I've never called a radio station. So yeah, I was nervous. But still, no matter what, that truly was fucking awesome. So, and again, thank you to everybody. Thank you to Lex and Terry. Thank you to Russ, Daniel with Tom and Dan. And it's just, I got so many more different messages from everybody. Thank you. Okay. Now I will get on with the rest of it before I start losing everybody. So I know where we left off at. I left off around the year 2000, which is when I had just I think I left off on the Drew Garabo. I just got into Drew Garabo a little bit more, and we went through all of that. So getting on into 2000 and on, sort of moving forward, this episode here is not going to be the timeline's not going to be as in order because for the life of me, I cannot think, can't picture, I can't think of everything to put them in line. I have tried my hardest and I just can't. There's just so much now that starts to happen and I just can't get the years sort of lined up. So anything that's out of order, if you're a fan, I do apologize, but I think you'll get the idea anyway. So moving on now, I left off on number one saying that I just got to hear about this duo up in New York, Opie and Anthony. So that was a big thing. Um, Hearing about all of that because um, they just got fired for a Sex for Sam thing that they did. So I'm really starting to hear a lot about that. All the radio shows are talking about it. It's making big news right now. Um, I know for going into 2001, going back to the Monsters again, the Monsters are still on the midday. So to bring everybody up to speed, I'm still a fan of Bubba the Love Sponge and Lex and Terry. So I'm going back and forth between those two still. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Sam Kavaris on Lex and Terry. Again, I haven't listened to him in so long. I don't know what all happened, but loved it when Sam was on there. I just left that off on the first one, but yeah. So to have Sam Kavaris on there was always really cool. I know he was on one of the news spots on TV. But the monsters. So I got Bubba the Love Sponge, Lex and Terry. Then I go on to the monsters for the afternoon, the midday show, but I still have Howard. But what had happened now is I went and purchased XM Radio. It was just coming out. So I went and purchased it. Actually, it was the little square unit that you got, and I bought the boom box to go with it, whatever it was actually called. But I so you could take the little radio and you could plug it into your truck or your car, whatever. It actually had a it was actually hooked up to a cassette that you put inside your cassette player, and yeah, it was old school, but it was cool. So I had XM radio, and then I had the boombox at work. So then I'd take my little resistor transistor radio looking thing, be able to take it inside and plug it up in there, and still have XM satellite radio. So they came up. One of the channels they had was Extreme XM. So the monsters had got put on there. So that became really cool because no matter what, they started their show at 10 a.m. on XM. So even if Howard is going longer in the mornings, till 10:30 or even 11 up to 11 o'clock, the monsters are already live on XM, which is the FCC is nowhere. They can't do anything with XM. So that was the cool part. So, um, you know, a lot of the little skits and shit they would talk about was fucking cool. I think they had Bubba the Love Sponge on there a little bit. The regular guys I really didn't listen to much, hardly. Um, so yeah, so now I got the monsters on there. Um, for the XM. And then, of course, when Howard would go off, they were still on XM, but then they also went back to terrestrial radio on 104.1. So everything went back to FCC rules for terrestrial radio. Um, so now with having XM, I'm still bouncing from XM radio to terrestrial radio. Um, so everything is it was a bit of a clusterfuck for me. It really was. I mean, I had wires going outside the building, um, where I could plug my antenna up on certain spots depending on where I was inside the warehouse. Um, but what I wanted to get into, one of the events that I wanted to get into was Bubba the Love Sponge. I'm still listening because again, Bubba and Lex and Terry are my morning show. So Bubba the Love Sponge got syndicated to Jacksonville on Planet something. I don't even know what the station was. It was something Planet, and of course that's Lex and Terry's home base at this time. It was on Rock 105. So this is when the radio war really started. At least I'm starting to pick up on this whole radio war thing. So Bubba would always try to call in to Lex and Terry in the morning. I'm switching stations back and forth. And so then Bubba decided to do a Lex and Terry funeral in Jacksonville, which was, we're going to bury you in the ratings sort of thing. So he was so Bubba was getting all of his fans together. We're going to do a parade through downtown Jacksonville, at 5:30 in the morning. Go right in front of the Lex and Terry studio. We want you blowing your horn and blah, blah, blah. And we're going to end. And it was right. The ending location was right over there somewhere by the Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium. So me and a buddy of mine at work, Sean, were like, we have to go to this. We're really giving Bubba props because this is gonna be epic. Um, so we went early that morning. It was a Friday morning, I believe. Whatever it was, we were not working. And I don't believe we would have took off for this, but there is a chance we might have. Because this was going to be a big thing, and we're really giving Bubba props on getting all this together. Um, and so we meet up that morning, and we're going to head from Ocala. We're heading Jacksonville. We're not going to be part of the parade or anything, but Hulk Hogan was going to be there, and a bunch of other stuff. So we are headed to Jacksonville, and it was at that time I think both of us really we switched. First, we were all Bubba based on how he set this up. But then we switched because we kept switching the radio stations back and forth, listening to them both. And I think for that one, we decided we had to give Lex and Terry the win for that. Um, because Bubba has it set up. He wants everybody blowing their horn and everything as they go by the Lex and Terry studio because Lex and Terry are live. They are doing their broadcast. But what had happened is Lex and Terry had bought a banner and hung on the outside of their studio. Thank you, Jacksonville, for making us number one. Honk your horn to say, we love you, Lex and Terry, and all this. And of course, you can hear everybody blowing their horns live on Lex and Terry. So, yeah, so it was cool for both, but at first it was just funny because we were so hooked on. This was Bubba's thing. Bubba won this, and then it was like, no, we got to give this to Lex and Terry because um, yeah, for them to come up with the plan and the idea to put the banner and stuff out was pretty damn cool. So anyway, I wanted to throw that little bit out there. So now the radio wars, as far as I know, I'm really getting a taste of the radio wars now, and um, I don't remember much with the Monsters really doing a radio war. I know they were with it with like um, Doc and Johnny. I think it I think it was. They got syndicated down to like West Palm Beach, and they had their little thing going. It was nothing really, really bad though. Nothing I can picture with the Monsters that they really made a big radio war of. I Now what I am is, after all of this here is going on, I'm trying to make sure I get everything somewhat in line for everybody here. Um, Actually, for me, to be honest with you. So what I have is, yeah, you probably see my papers here that I'm trying to like lay it all out. Um, I'm not a professional. So let's see. Now we're going to start fresh and clean here. We're going to fast forward all the way up to 2004, which was the famous Super Bowl with Janet Jackson. And that in itself changed radio, terrestrial radio, at least for a listener like me. I know I had to change for everybody else as well, that's actually in that business, but just for a for somebody like me, just to be an outsider, a listener, it changed a lot. Um, what had happened with that, right after all that there had happened, first I remember getting into work. Actually, it was going to work that morning. I kicked on 98 Rock and they're playing rock and roll. My first thought is Bubba is running late. But then it's still, I'm all the way to work now and it's still the same. So I know I'm putting it back on Lex and Terry at this time, but I keep going back thinking what's they were playing some weird stuff and it was really weird. And it actually took one of the guys that worked in one of the offices that knew what all I listened to. He had actually came out and informed me he was just checking the internet and had seen an article where Bubba had been fired from 98 Rock due to I think it was a $755,000 fine. So he was officially fired. And for being a fan, man, it was like, fuck, now what? Um, it's crazy to say that that bothered me so fucking much, but it did. I just, I guess it sort of floored me. And at the same time, and again, that's why I said a lot of this is might be out of order a tad bit. I know Howard Stern had decided he did not want to be in terrestrial radio, period. But he also, either it was him or it was Clear Channel Communications, one or the other. I think it might have been Clear Channel taking him off. Clear Channel had removed him from all their stations, which also included Rural Radio 104.1 in Orlando. So I remember one morning I had got up and got the news on, and they were talking that Howard Stern has no longer on in Orlando, and now the monsters of the midday are going to fill in the mornings. I'm cool with that. I didn't know if that was going to be an ongoing thing, or I really thought it was just going to be like a little temporary thing there. Um, but undoubtedly it wasn't. That's just sort of the way it stayed. But and some things changed. I know like Jeff Howe that was on the Monsters, which I know he still calls in and that kind of stuff. But I know he had to give it up based on his career as a singer. A bunch of the stuff he does, he wasn't able to make it to work that early in the morning, so he had to he had to give up his spot there on the show. But as Howard's gone, Bubba's fired. Howard is no longer on Clear Channel anymore. Now the Monsters are on in the morning. And now I'm hearing all this talk of this Opie and Anthony going on XM. So I'm checking into that now because I had the XM already. And of course, they put them on a premium channel. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think I paid like $1.99 um, for their channel. It was a little trial, whatever run. But yeah, so I had to pay the $1.99, and listening to them, um, I really, really fucking enjoyed them. As far as the comedy was just fucking, it was just crazy. Um, and I think a lot of it that I learned over the years as well. But Anthony and Jim Norton, they had they worked together. They I guess they fed off each other so well. And nothing against Opie. Opie had the most experience and all that, and keeping the show moving. But yes, it was definitely a it was a new thing for me. But yeah, I really did become a huge fan of Opie and Anthony. And then a lot really started to happen because it wasn't long after that that I started to hear about this Jocktober that they had done, which was basically in the month of October, Opie and Anthony would each day they would just demolish another radio show, which was so they had Sam Roberts. I think he was more of an intern, but and Sam, Sam was awesome and still is to this day. Jim and Sam on a Sirius right now. I still watch. I still listen to them as well. Um, but yeah, so Sam, there was just something about him on how he did all this stuff. But so he would put it together. So there was one show each day for the whole month of October, and the guys would just rip them apart. They would play bits from that particular show, and then all of Opie and Anthony's fans, the Pest as they were called, would just crush their message boards, their Facebook pages, um, and it really became a big thing. I mean, it was making national news about this Jocktober, and I was always wondering if anybody that I knew would ever actually make it. If anybody around the Orlando area or Ocala area um, would actually make it. And I don't remember any of them making it except for I know there was Shannon Burke. I think he ended up getting Jocktobered. If I'm not mistaken, Jim Phillips did. Or if he didn't, it was because he was on in the afternoons. But there was a big thing going on with Jim Phillips as well. Um, and then there was Alex and Terry. So like for me again, this is I'm torn so much. And at this time, Bubba is still, you know, he's still getting paid from 98 Rock. I had finally found out, based on some news articles and some stuff that I had read on the internet. So he's still getting paid off his contract, but he's still not on the radio. But now I have Opie and Anthony and Lex and Terry feuding back and forth in their radio war, which again sucked for me. I'm a fan of both, so I'm trying to stay neutral. Um, and then I got the Monsters in the morning, so I'm listening to so much. And again, it goes back to what I had said on the last episode that I I don't think I ever listened to an actual full full show. Um, yeah, that was my thing. because I was bouncing around so much listening to all the different people. Um, so yeah, it was pretty entertaining. But like I said, I hated it though. That I did. That was a yeah, I just that was a big time for me. So what I have is I wanted to see if I could get this to pull up, and I'm not sure if it will. Um, I think I even can get it to pop up or not. So let's just see. Let me double check this real quick. Um, Let me see. Let's see if this will work. That one's not, and this okay. So I'm not gonna be able to pull this up for some odd reason. It doesn't seem to want to work for me like I was hoping it would. Um, okay. So now the radio war is officially on, and we went through Jocktober. We went through, and Jocktober was funny because that's when I learned a lot more about the War of the Roses and the Fugitive, which is some skits that different radio shows do. I learned a lot of that from Opie and Anthony when they were doing their whole Jocktober. So now, and I got to back up for 1 second to say before Bubba had got fired from 98 Rock, he went on in, I believe it's Hartford. It was Hartford, Connecticut. Bubba had got put on a station there, which is still in the vicinity of where Howard Stern is. So now, I remember Bubba trying to call in to Howard Stern. Um, so at this time, even though I'm not a Howard fan really, I'm switching the channels back and forth. So now I'm going between Bubba at one time, going between Bubba, Howard, and Lex and Terry, listening to everything. Um, and believe it or not, I actually did get my work done. I was still able to work while all this shit is going on still. But but I had to say this to say, um, we move on. I pretty well got everything in line now. I got Lex and Terry, and I'm switching over to the Monsters. Um, Shannon Burke had went on in the afternoons on Real Radio, so I started to learn who Shannon Burke was as well. Um, and then word had came out that Howard had now left terrestrial radio and went over to Sirius. This is before Sirius and XM teamed up together, so it's two completely separate companies. And Howard was already over there with his, I think he had two or three channels. And it was crazy that he actually hired Bubba on Sirius to be one of his channels. So now at this time I have XM. So I lost out on all of Bubba the Love Sponge while he was on Sirius. And what's crazy is everybody says that was the best radio ever that Bubba had done. Um, Now, and I've read a lot and I've listened to a lot on YouTube and that kind of stuff, but I never, I never actually listened to him live on Sirius. So, but I did start to listen back in after he was on there in 98 or 98, 2008. Bubba had announced that he was also going to he was going back to terrestrial radio as well on 102.5 The Bone. They were switching over to an all talk format. So that one is in Tampa. That one I can actually pick up. So Bubba's going to be on in the mornings now. My whole fucking everything now is just getting just fucking crazy now. Um, the one good thing I have is on for Opie and Anthony, there's a replay for them. So I'm catching them at all different times. So I'm somewhat I'm able to keep up with Opie and Anthony and Jim Norton and Sam Roberts and them, so I'm that one I'm able to keep up with. But now I got the monsters, and again, still doing Lex and Terry. What had happened with Lex and Terry though is, and I forgot what year that actually was. Um, Lex and Terry got kicked off or fired from, or not fired, sorry. Um, they lost a day on Rock 104 out of Gainesville because of their Drunk Bitch Friday. Um, Rock 104 out of Gainesville was actually owned by the University of Florida, so it was a college station. So, um, yeah, a bunch of shit there had happened, and then they originally took them off just on Fridays, so that wouldn't be cast um, over the airwaves. But then they ended up dropping them all together. I could not hardly pick up very well Rock 105 out of Jacksonville. Still a good signal, I'm assuming, but I couldn't get a really good signal on where I was at. So now I got this big jumble of monsters. I got Bubba back on in Tampa. When I can pick up Lex and Terry, I can trying to pick up them. Um, and then my afternoons are changing some because now I got Shannon Burke, and it wasn't long after that Shannon Burke got fired for his little whatever when he shot the gun and blah blah blah. I don't know what actually happened, but so but to have Bubba back was cool, but I'm really torn with the monsters and Bubba. And but I just kept listening to them both. I um I was fine with all of that. And what the biggest thing, where that? Yeah, so I was just basically bouncing around. And I got to the point of some days I was even listening to one show one day and then one show the next day. Um, and with the monsters going on, there was so much there. Because I was still going to so many events for them. I told you about the Miss Monsters that we had went to, and we went to, they were in Hard Rock. We went to that. Um, Daniel and Carlos, Daniel and Black Bean at the time, but they did a Smoky Ninja, for the Florida Film Festival. Me and my wife went to Orlando to go watch that. We did some Monster Weens they did on Church Street. Um, so I'm really still involved with everything that they're doing. We're going to so many of their events. Um, None of the other ones I really was able to go to any of the events. So we had Bubba had a big thing that had happened on 102.5, which again, you know, it messed up all of my shit. But the whole and I'm not going to get into it, but the whole Hogan sex tape, whatever, all that kind of stuff there was, um, all that had happened, which in turn Bubba had lost his job at 102.5. So, and I didn't listen. I started to fade off a little bit, I think, based on because I really like Spice Boy on Bubba, and he had left, and there was a few people that were leaving the shows, and I'm not much for change. I really do hate change. So, but yeah, I got fired from 102.5, the Bone, and um, but it's like he always was able to come back again. So, um, I really lost a lot of people, but I picked up a few. On 102.5, I picked up, that's when I first heard of the Billy Madison show. They were out of Texas or Oklahoma, But so I learned about Billy and Derek and Nard. Um, so we actually listened to them in the middays. Um, I forgot who went on Real Radio 104.1 and after Shannon Burke. But somebody had went on there, so we would actually switch it over to the Bone and listen to the Billy Madison show. Really, really enjoyed that. Um, Bubba then had got a he got a radio station given to him basically. And again, I don't want to comment too much because I don't know all the ins and outs on how all this shit works. I try to do as much homework as I can just because I'm a fan, but I know that he had lost his job at Sirius, and from what I gather on that is they cut the pay down so much that he was basically said fuck y'all and I'm out. And then he lost it from one at 2.5. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure he was probably still under contract, so I'm sure he still got paid. But then he had went on, I think it was Bubba 98 or Bubba 97. They named a radio station after him. And he's got the morning show, and Manson's doing some stuff in the afternoons. Um, and the signal, the only problem though is the signal really sucked. I could pick it up, but man, it was so hard to pick up. So I missed a lot or most of it. But then the next thing I know, after all this whole sex tape thing had happened, is I remember the episodes I heard. I heard talk about Bubba's talking himself that he is going to be number one. That he's got a guy that works for the Nelson ratings, and he's got a mole, and they're letting him know, that he's going to beat Mike Calta out, Cowhead, and he's going to be number one. And then of course, come to find out, Bubba actually did not have any of that. He actually had the little units and whatever, from what I gather. Um, Basically was just cheating in the ratings. So the Nelson ratings had sued him, and um, yeah, so he lost that job at Beasley and lost that radio station. And about this time, I have now moved from Florida to South Carolina. So now I'm basically out of the whole talk radio. Everything I've been through and been a huge fan and, live and breathe this shit. Once I had a lot of stuff that had happened personally in my life. Yeah, my dad had passed away and other family members had passed away, and I had a business that I lost, and just a bunch of stuff. So we moved up to the South Carolina area, and yeah, I was just pretty well out of the whole talk radio, listening to anything. And then um, I downloaded the iHeart app on my phone at work and doing a powder coating and was listening to something. I forgot what it was. But then I just started going through and seeing what all was on there, and I realized that the monsters were on there. And it went way, 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 way back. Um, so I literally took it as far back as I could on iHeart and started from there again. Because you take all the commercials out, I could usually get two, sometimes even up to three shows a night. I'll work night shift, and so I was able to catch up pretty quickly. But it was so different then because I had lost out, quite a few years. Um, I know when I had just stopped listening so much, it already changed. I know Bubba Whoop-Ass Wilson had been fired. Um, Savannah had left, and last I heard, she went to California. right before I had moved, right before I had left Florida. Um, and who else? And then um, Daniel, and that was a really big one for me. That Daniel had, they couldn't come to an agreement with his contract, and Daniel was one of my favorites, and still is to this day. But yeah, so after he had left, I knew they were going to do a podcast, or it was in the talks anyway, because I watched a few of his videos that he had posted on YouTube. So all of this stuff here is all has happened, and Carlos is gone. Black Bean, he had gotten fired. Um, so now that I'm listening again, Carlos is back on. Um, Junkie the Bear is no longer on. Um, and it's taken me a while to catch up with everybody to see where everybody is. And that's when I found out that a mediocre time with Tom and Dan, that they finally had gotten their podcast going, and was extremely successful from what I was did a little bit of reading on it. So Carlos was back, and Jim Phillips had announced his retirement, and Dirty Jim was leaving the show to go do the takeover for Jim Phillips. Um, and then I found out that Drew Garabo, of course, he had went to a few different stations, but he had also gotten picked up on 102.5 The Bone. Um, yeah, there was just a whole lot. I um I stopped listening to XM. I forgot about what year. Um, but then everything, because so much had changed. And then for Opie and Anthony, whenever Anthony had gotten fired in 2014, I believe it was, that for me that changed a lot. And and not talking shit about Opie or a Jim, but it wasn't the same chemistry there that they had. So, and I did not for till just recently. I didn't listen to Opie Radio, so I didn't get to hear what he actually had going. And with Sam and Jim, I didn't really hear anything until just recently, and I started listening to him in the past year and a half. And again, I'm a big fan. So, and then I found Bubba after everything that had happened there. I found Bubba the Love Sponge actually on Twitch, which sounded funny at the time. And he was on in South Carolina, but he was on in Charleston, and I'm on the whole other side of the state. So, but I'm watching Twitch, so I would play Twitch and listen to Bubba the replay again at night. Still listen to the monsters. Um, you know, and Tuttle had a show on Bubba, because Tuttle had left the Monsters now and is working with Bubba. And yeah, this one, and that's why I try to make it clear when I was starting episode 2 here. This one is just a complete clusterfuck on so much going on. I'm just trying to hit all the high points because I cannot get everything actually in line. Um, and um, yeah, so I finally catch up with everything with the monsters, and I am a BDM member for Tom and Dan, so I'm a paid member for them, and I didn't know whatever happened to Anthony for a while, from Opie and Anthony. And just again doing some more research, I found him on YouTube, and then realized he had Compound Media. Um, So I jumped on that pretty quickly as soon as I had found out, and yeah, loved his shows, and it's cool now that he has actually left New York and has moved here to Greenville, South Carolina, which is pretty fucking funny. But but yeah, and then in 2019, I'm still working nights, but that's when the big thing had happened on Bubba the Love Sponge when Manson had left. And for as far as parody songs go, there is nobody better that I've ever heard than Manson, Michael Waters on Bubba. So now I'm it's like I'm almost back to 2000 again. I've got so many people I'm trying to listen to. So I'm still watching Cluster F now to keep up with Manson. Still watching Bubba on Twitch, trying to watch Tuttle on his podcast that he's doing. I still got the Monsters on iHeart on the app that I'm listening to, and the BDM with Tom and Dan. Yeah, it was all just fucking crazy, and really it still is. So all that goes all the way up until um till now. You know, everything has led up to this. There's so many podcasts now, though. It does make it easier for me. I don't have to worry so much about catching everybody live. Um, So I do this little, I'll listen to one and then I'll switch over and listen to another one day. And the next day I'll watch another or listen to another one live. Because when those are over, I will go back throughout the day with my earbuds in and basically catch almost everybody else. Um, yeah. And then I will go through all of that and usually have a little bit of time left over. So, after I decided to, do a little podcast and have a little fun with it, I started checking out other podcasts to sort of see what was out there on YouTube. And that in itself is just a cluster fuck of podcast wars. Um, so you can almost that's a whole nother show in itself is just podcast wars. Um, we just went through radio wars. So, and I know there's a bunch of them that are, I put a post on Twitter and I think it was Daniel had actually replied back that most of the podcast guys are, and, and, and girls and women, are really nice and forthcoming and helping but a lot of them that are still tied into a little bit of a radio stuff from back in the day, they seem to still have that edginess, that edginess still going. So I think even though 90's radio and the shock jock and radio wars and all that has basically died off for the most part, um, now it seems more that podcast it has now taken up the slack. So, um, yeah, and for podcast, I podcast will be episode 3 actually. Um, I thought about actually doing it all one and just knocking everything out, but I've listened to so many different podcast people. And I want to make sure that I word everything correctly because I don't want to talk bad about anybody. I don't know these people. Um, the radio stuff I don't know, but I've listened to them long enough that I think that I know them. I feel like I know them. And they don't fucking know me. I'm a fucking nobody. So, um, but to go back to a couple of highlights. You know, this morning to get to talk to Russ on the air with the monsters was extremely cool. Russ and Angel and Ryan. I know Ryan likes to be a little smart ass, but that's him. He is a comedian, so haha, funny, funny. But no matter which way it goes, I still like all three of the guys. I really feel for Carlos. He had got let go based on iHeart, um, you know, making cuts. So, but I do follow Carlos with to the top on and YouTube and on Facebook. So, and to have watched him, get to where he is now. I remember his first show that I remember seeing him on. I was a big Prison Break fan, so to be able to see Carlos when he was on Prison Break was really fucking cool. And then of course, I was just one of the Walking Dead guys. So, then to see Carlos on The Walking Dead and then on the Marvel and Disney. Yeah. So, I know Carlos is going to do fine though. He is he's a go-getter, as you would say. Um, and then with Tom and Dan, I listen to them a lot. Mostly a mediocre. I'm not really into the corporate time too much. It is what it is, but it's just your basic terrestrial radio. But yeah, listening to the BDM and I've taken it back and again listened to so many of the episodes since they had started. Um, and watched the documentary that they had, which is on Amazon, which is really cool. So if you haven't watched it, you ought to pull that up. Sort of gives a little bit of their story and their history, and yeah, and then I will still listen to Bubba. Um, it's changed a lot. And I lived in Ocala, so when he bought the Speedway, I actually raced at his Speedway. So you know, that was that was also pretty cool. That was 10 plus years ago, but that was cool. And now I listen to Cluster F and Spice Boy from Bubba is on there on Wednesday for the Hang. So I became a big fan of the Hang, listening to them two go back and forth and talk about the old radio days. So I signed up for that one. I have so many people complain about they have so many subscriptions for their TV with Netflix and Hulu and Disney and Peacock, and I do not have any of those or don't have too many of those. I have more on the radio though. To be a Compound Media subscriber and a Cluster F subscriber and a BDM subscriber. So that there is basically, and then I got a couple of them on YouTube that I have signed up for to catch member only shows. So yeah, that is I think that is about it. I think I have covered most of from 1992, 93 all the way up until today. 2024 March or May 7th. Is it the 7th or the 8th? The 8th. Um, being able to talk to Russ, and Angel and Ryan on the Monsters was pretty fucking awesome. So now if I can just work it and get on Tom and Dan, come on guys. Um, I also was gonna have Tuttle too. I'm hoping to do a be able to have Tuttle on, not live here, of course, but for us to do basically a call and a video in to each other. I'm hoping he'll still do it with me. I know he's back with Bubba doing a podcast, him and a Colton, but I'm still hoping I can make that happen. And again, I think I would like to be able to talk to Tom and Dan. Um, I know Tom is always still talking about the old 90s radio stuff. And he would, to be Drunky the Bear was, I remember seeing a lot of his shit that he had did, a lot of his stunts. We used to go to a lot of the Orlando Predator games. So I've seen a lot of it there. Um, so yeah, I'm trying to name drop, be plugging them, tagging them in this video. See if I can't make something happen there, just because it would be fucking awesome. To talk to all of my, the people that I grew up listening to, that I'm huge fans of. So anyway, I think I have hit everything. Russ had asked me about episode one. I had kept mentioning that my boss was a dick, and that I should have went into that more. I didn't really think much about it. I just kept having to throw it out there. But so for Russ Rollins, um, I'll make it really really fast. But no, I worked at an asphalt plant, and um, I was a young guy. So I'm talking I'm 18, and I'm the grunt guy, and he was just a hardcore. I run this asphalt plant guy. It's what he's did for years, and he put that place above everything, including his family. Um, I know I was not married when I first took the job. So I explained to him that I was, going to be getting married here in the next couple of months, and that I would be taking probably 2 or 3 days off after. And we had already got into an argument, even on my, I'm there to interview for the job. My dad worked there as well, so that's how I was able to get my foot in the door. But he was already telling me, that all I needed to do was just, go to the courthouse, and I could get it knocked out pretty quickly that way, which really threw me off. And I also explained to him that my wife was, or wasn't my wife at the time, but my fiance was pregnant, and that when my son was going to be born, I would be taking off probably a week, just to help her. We were young and just getting started out in life, and a life together. And yeah, I will never forget it. He even told my dad the same thing. So my dad's going to have his first grandson, his first grandkid. Period. I was an only child. I am an only child. Um, but that there was no. Me and my dad should only go to the hospital um, minutes before my son would be born. That there was no sense in being up there earlier because there was nothing we could do. So there was no sense in even going up there. Um, and then after the fact, there was no reason for that. That we were needed there at the asphalt plant. That is what was important. And yeah, I bit my tongue a lot. My dad had been there long enough; he didn't have to bite his tongue as much, but I did. So that was my whole comment on my boss was a complete prick, and that's just how it went. I did take the time off when I got married, and I did take the time off when my son was born, and I caught hell when I went back to work. And it wasn't long after that I had finally left, and pursued other stuff. Got into manufacturing and machine work and powder coating and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, yeah, that was my boss is a prick sort of little story there. So anyway, I want to go back and thank everybody again. Lex and Terry, thank y'all for the kind words and the shout outs. Um, Tom and Dan, thank y'all as well. Russ, the monsters, thank y'all. Um, Billy Madison, thank y'all as well. Um, Trying to think who else. I think I got likes from Opie and or Anthony. And I missed a lot too. And Tuttle as well. Um, I could not remember everybody to go in there and try to tag. And I don't know. I didn't want to. I felt weird even tagging everybody. But then at the same time, I thought it was cool. Maybe they would want to hear it. And the response that I got, the people that did reply back to me did say that it was cool to hear like a fan perspective of it, of of all of that, growing up doing it all. So anyway, truly want to say thank you to everybody. I'm still a huge fan, and I try to listen to as many as I can. I might be a day or two behind, but yeah, I am still a huge fan of all talk radio and podcasts now. And shooting for show number 3, episode number 3 will be podcast. I want to get into a lot of the podcasts that I've listened to. I'm just learning these people, so I can't go into a whole lot of detail, but I do want to just get into um, who they are and what I've seen against who's against who and the whole podcast war sort of thing. Which ones I like the most, which ones I don't care for as much, maybe. Um, just and again, I don't want to badmouth anybody. Shit, this is all new to me. But would like to ask everybody to please like and subscribe to Podcast Media here on YouTube. Also, I'm getting everything set up on Spotify. Um, but me and a good friend of mine, Mike, we also do Time Out with Rick and Mike Uncensored. So if any of y'all want to go, you can also follow that on Spotify. Trying to get everything else in line for Not Another Podcast to be able to be on Spotify and Amazon and that kind of stuff. But everything right now is on YouTube. This is on YouTube as well as Time Out. Um, Everything is on Podcast Media. So thank you again. I truly cannot thank y'all enough for the awesome ass fucking support. You are all truly awesome. Thank you, and thank you again. See y'all next week. Later.